Today we gather, hearts held tight, to honour a woman who lived her life right, a lady of wisdom, sharp and astute. In business and in life, she bore lasting fruit. She had a mind that could see far ahead, with courage and vision wherever she led. Through hard work, determination, she made her way, building a legacy that remains today. Yet beyond her success and all that she achieved were the people she cherished, the lives that she weaved. A devoted mother, loving and true, whose greatest pride as her family grew. As a grandmother, her love knew no end, a guiding hand, a trusted friend. Her laughter and her stories, her caring embrace, will forever remain in each treasured place. She found joy upon the fairways green, chasing the perfect shot, serene. Golf was a passion that she carried with pride, a reflection of the grace that she showed in her stride. And her beloved Ulverston held a special part, not just her hometown, but home to her heart. Its streets, its people, the sea and the sky were woven into the fabric of her life gone by. And though today we grieve and tears may fall, we remember a woman admired by all, strong yet kind, accomplished yet warm, a steady presence through every storm. So we say goodbye, though never farewell, for in our hearts she will always dwell. And in Ulverston's breeze, by the gentle sea's roll, we will find her spirit, and we will carry her soul. Ladies and gentlemen, today there might be, hopefully, some smiles, maybe a little bit of laughter, perhaps a few tears, but no regrets. Today we meet to celebrate the life of Dorothy Dot Bellinger, a wife, a mum, a mother-in-law, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a sister, sister-in-law, an auntie and a friend. A woman whose life was characterised by hard work, by determination, by confidence, a love of fun, a round of golf, and her love and her dedication to her family. A ceremony such as this is an opportunity for us all to join in the taking of our leave of someone who we have loved, who we have respected. But it's more than that. It is the celebration of her life, the celebration of her personality, and it's a time to comfort her family and her friends, and to join together as part of the wider Central Coast community in paying respect to this lady, a true Ulverston identity. And so, on behalf of Dot's family, I welcome you all here this afternoon. My name is Simon, and along with all of the staff of Parkside Funerals, we have been privileged to have been invited to care for Dot after her death and to play just a small part in this service. There are undoubtedly some people who can't be with us today for varying reasons, and so I'd like to mention that we are thinking of them, mentioning especially at this time Dot's son John, her brother Jeff, great-granddaughter Kiara, and good friends Murray and Robin. I'm sure that they're all taking a few quiet moments to think of all of us here and remembering Dot in their own way. I also welcome all of you who have joined us online via the live stream. Your presence is equally as important whether you are here in person or here in spirit. At the conclusion of this service, you're all warmly invited to remain here at the Rowing Club with Dot's family to share with them in a time of refreshment. And I'm sure maybe as the drinks flow, so will the stories and the memories. There are many things that make a town, that make a community. Things like infrastructure, roads and shops and buildings and parks. Services like the police, the fire and the paramedics. A council that mostly supports and listens to its people. And events like fiestas and festivals and markets and shows. But most importantly, it's the people who make a community. The characters, the identities, the people whose names are synonymous with the name of this town. It only takes a quick look at tributes and comments on some of the well-known media platforms a few weeks ago at the time of Dot's death to realise that Dorothy Bellinger was one of those people. A few weeks ago, Dot's family held a private service, saying their private family goodbye to Dot, just as they did for Arthur some 12 years ago. And at that service, Dot's little brother, who can't be here with us today, delivered a tribute. And we will start our time of sharing Dot's story with Jeff's tribute. Thanks, Jeff.
For those who have not met, Dottie wished to introduce me as her little brother, or my little brother. No name, just I was her little brother. Dottie was brought up on the farm in Preston, as Dudley said, being the second of four. 2 years between she and Jimmy. Then 8 years later I came on. Always said it was before and after the war. And 4 years later we had Suzanne join our little mob. During her younger years she was very much a country girl, enjoying fishing with Dad. In later years I tagged along with the annual trip on Good Friday on the tractor and trailer through the ferns to the Gawler River, and there was no road back there to catch blackfish for dinner. She always claimed the first blackfish I caught in the river was one she had previously caught, but with me pestering, I had not caught a fish. She put it on my line when I was not looking, threw it back in the river for me to pull out, not realising it was dead. That was Dottie. When I was about 12, I went with her on a Sunday afternoon to our neighbours next door. Cannot remember how it happened, but they introduced me to having a drink of sherry, with the result being they had perhaps a sip too much. Went home very happy and swaying a little bit, to which she justified later, saying it was a part of growing up. One of our neighbours, who was present on the day, is here today with us, and I cannot remember thanking her for the experience. To this day, I've not touched sherry. She was always looking out for me, as one day when my cousin was staying on the farm, we decided to go over the railway line into the culvert, as we'd heard that bulrushes were a good substitute for tobacco. We had no sooner looked up on the railway line, and there were Dottie and her friends watching us, then going home and dobbing to Mum. Even though there were 8 years between us, we always had a close relationship that developed further even in the later years. During her teenage years, she was very active playing sports, hockey in winter, tennis in summer, on the old courts at Preston, which are now where the car park is for the community centre. She also played a couple of games of women's football, with one match in particular in 1957 between Ulverston and Devonport for charity, which is recorded in the history of football on the northwest coast. She was a very good kicker of football, as during weekends, when she came home after work or school, she and I would cook end to end on the farm. She was a true supporter of St Kilda, having stuck with them all the way. And together with Arthur, they actually have witnessed something that not a lot have. They were actually at the ground on the day they won their one and only grand final. She was also a member of Junior Farmers, which is now Rural Youth. Following her marriage to Arthur and family and business interests, sport fell into the background until the mid-2000s, when she bought her first set of golf clubs, as I remember it quite clearly. We were at a family function on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland when Arthur told us she had bought her golf clubs, with him looking at me and saying, "Jeff, I reckon they'll get rusty." He was right, until she retired in 2013 when she took up golf again, and following Arthur's passing in 2014, it was her main outlet. It was after Arthur's passing she met Fleur King during one of her golfing days and became golfing mates and great friends, continued right through to her passing. They together travelled Tasmania, east coast of Australia, South Australia, playing golf. My wife Maureen and I regularly had a dinner or lunch with Dottie and Fleur, and they would recount some of their trips, not in detail, but little bits every now and then. I am of the firm view, with a little bit we heard of the old saying, what happens on the trip stays on the trip. On behalf of the family, Fleur, I would like to acknowledge your friendship and caring of her welfare and being so forthright with her, to which she enjoyed being challenged, and keeping in touch with her by regularly after work, talking with her all the way as you commuted between Burnie and Devonport, and I know the respect she had to you as a true friend and as a golfing mate. Dottie, during her time in business, worked long hours, was not afraid to get her hands dirty and ask her staff nothing she would not do herself. She was a hard taskmaster, but outside of work hours she was back to her caring, compassionate mode. She had a great sense of humour, and at times at her own expense, especially if Arch was around. She was a passionate supporter of the town of Ulverstone and her support of many schools and groups, together with always remembering where she came from, being a strong voice for supporting functions, events at Preston, and her endless support for anything related to the Ulverstone High School after having been in the first intake of students. Having been, for the most part of her working life, a part of business in Raby Street, she knew nearly every person or knew someone who knew them in Ulverstone. She believed in strong family values and was so proud of her children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren that during our regular catch-ups on phone or in person, she'd tell me what each of you were up to and so proud of your achievements. She was a truly, totally family-orientated person, as nearly always at the end of the conversation, she would ask, "How are the kids?" which were my children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And she always made sure she acknowledged everyone's birthday. To me, her love of her family was so evident, as recently when I visited her in hospital when she has difficulty communicating to us, but how her face lit up when her great-grandson walked in was something I will never forget. To everyone, she will be missed. She was an amazing woman, a friend to many, a wonderful mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and special auntie to all her nieces, nephews, great-niece and great-nephew, and would have done anything for you all, to us as siblings. Thank you for being our sister. Dottie, I'm sure you will bring Arch up to date on the happenings of the last 12 years. While you're there, just say hi to Mum and Dad and check on the big fella. Please let Arch know you made it on time today, Dottie. Dottie, we all have our individual memories of you and we'll miss you every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. To continue in telling Dot's story, I would like to invite her nephew, Phil, to come across and start sharing some of his thoughts and memories of his auntie with us. Thanks, Phil.
Can everyone hear? Can everyone hear? Down the back? We'll firstly I'll just explain. I'm waiting on 2 knee operations, so I'm not as mobile as I was. And I remember the day of my mum's memorial service, I was having a cup of tea up at Only Dots beforehand. She says to me, she said, "Don't go on too long," she said today. "You went a bit far too long with your father's everything." So I'll respect her wishes and I won't go on too long today. I'll fill in a few other little things that Jeff didn't mention. She was educated at the Preston School. The school burnt down while she was at the school, as Dad was the same. They were both at the Preston School when it burnt down. I don't know that they had any involvement there, but Dottie was a good student. Dad wasn't all that good. Could have been, but he didn't really like school. She had 12 months at Sprint, area school, and then the opening in the first intake, as they mentioned, with the Ulverston High School. When she left school, she started work at the ANZ Bank, both here and in Hobart for some time. And then, of course, she married Arch, or we call him Arch Arthur. He became Arch over the years. And from there on in, not the first 12 months of their marriage, they bought the shop at West Ulverston. She was brought up by Nan and Pop, Jim and Jane Lewis. Pop was a big, strong, tall, very quiet, unassuming man. And Nan was, I've heard Nan described as a true Briton. She was one of the finest women that ever walked on this earth. Sorry about that. Dottie got her character and a forthrightness and a determination from Nan, and also her auntie, Muriel Struthers, who quite a few of you might know, went to school. They were 2 very formidable women, and of course Dottie, with their influence over on her upbringing, because she boarded with Jim and Muriel Struthers from the age of 12. So those 2 people had probably the biggest impact on her character and her upbringing. She met Arthur at a Latrobe dance one night in the late 50s, and from there on in, everything was, they were a great partnership and couple. They got married here, they got married at the church, Presbyterian Church, and here at the rowing club for a reception, so therefore this is always meant a lot to her, the rowing club. They had a very happy marriage all the way through, and they were a great business partnership. Both hard workers. They had the shop over at Ulverston until about 1964 and sold it, and had a few years where Uncle Arthur, I think Michael came along in between, he was working for Webster's Machinery and he had a few other jobs like that. And then in 66, 67 they bought a menswear shop, which was in the little shop next to Lloyd's Dry Cleaners in Ulverston in Raby Street. That was their first experience with Raby Street. Now the matriarchs of Raby Street, Dot Bellinger in the last 60 years will go down as one of those for sure. I was thinking about it. I started off, and those that are old enough to remember, and I can just remember, probably Ollie Bramage would rank there. Lily Kataris from Lakin's Milk Bar, Ellen Wallinger from Rose Jewellers, Ivy Lewis from Lewis's Milk Bar, and Dottie for sure as well in that group. And if you look and remember all those ladies, they were all of the same character, fairly determined and forthright and knew what they wanted to do. She actually had the menswear shop for a little while, and it was actually, they found out a lot of the stock was all old and not very saleable. So Uncle Arthur had quite a few trips to the West Coast. They weren't as fashion conscious down there. He'd take a van load of stuff down and cleared the stock, because financially that wasn't a great move. So then they ventured into suit hire, and they started hiring and had Bellinger's suit hire along the north of the state for quite a few years, up until about 1980, I think. They took it over in the shop that they had in Raby Street. A young bloke of Hingston's bought that business and took it over. While they were in Raby Street with that, down in the path of a sports store where Jack Wright had, she got talking to Mrs. Jimmy Brown. And Mrs. Jimmy Brown, who was a distant relation of us, but that had nothing to do with it, told her that her and Jimmy were retiring. And Mrs. Brown, in the front of the shop where he cut the hair, sold the tats tickets. So they took over that shop, a few shop fittings, and walked in, did it up, and they continued to sell the tats tickets along with the tobacconist. 2 or 3 years later, Tattersalls introduced Tats Lotto, and that was one of the best things that ever happened to Dottie and Arthur. For a few $100 shop fittings, she sold for hundreds of thousands, sold the actual lotto agency 38 years later. And really, it was the second biggest lotto shop in the network of Tattersalls, and ran it well. They were always promoting things, had quite a few $1 million winners. Uncle Arthur always used to say when you're advertising and we just had a winner, he said, I really think it's false economy. He said, if you've had a win, you've had your luck, you probably won't get it again. But they did sell about 8 or 6 or 7 or 8, Mike might know, first division winners over the years. She always organised big syndicates and so forth when there were big draws. Put a lot of work into it, and that's how she stayed the second biggest one in the network. I remember when I was selling real estate in the 1990s, she rang me one day. Another agent had a shop, a little florist shop at West Ulverston for sale, just leasehold. She said, oh, bloody tats, she said, they're on about putting a lotto agency over West Ulverston. She said, I don't want any opposition. She said, the lease on that florist shop's $28,000. She said, come down and pick a cheque up for $2,800 and go and get the agent. I'll sign the contract. We'll buy the business and I'll put one over there. 2 weeks later, Tattersalls changed their mind. So she blew a deposit and got out of that. But anyway, that was the type of thing at times she had to do to keep the Ulverston, which was different management at Tattersalls. But she always had most of the management's mark. I think some of them were a bit scared of her, and when the management had changed, she'd just get used to them again and train them a bit. Then at one stage, she had an agency for the lotto in Prospect and another one in Devonport, and ran all three. By this stage, the family are all involved. Michael and John, family, grandchildren working in the business. Uncle Arthur, of course. And in part of that, they started the variety side of the business up, $2 type stuff. And Uncle Arthur was busy with an old postal truck carrying the stock around. They had a shop in Launceston, one in Devonport, one here in Ulverston, and they did have one in Burnie, but they didn't refer to that as Bellinger's Variety. That was known as the Burnie Salvage Centre. She was taught by an old Jew in Melbourne once. He said, there's only two good sales, Dottie. She said, what are they? He said, an opening one and a closing one. So she'd have a few of those at the Salvage Centre without affecting the actual Bellinger side. The little things that had happened at times, he mentioned he always had a good sense of humour. She was in the shop one day, walking down the aisle, and there was this lady she knew very well, long-term customer, having a real old chuckle. And Dottie said, what's the laugh? What's going on? Oh, she said, these sauces you've got here, Dottie. She said, do you ever check the brand name? She said, no, they're a one-off lot. She said, I won't be getting any more. There's about 5 different varieties. Yes, she said, but have a look at it. She said, I'm too old to buy this sauce. Dottie looked at it and she said, what was the brand of it? He said, oh, I have a bit on the side. So Dottie had a good laugh with her as well. She also had a sense of humour in the face of adversity. When I came to see her the first week she was in the Burnie Hospital on the Sunday, I had an hour and a half to be there to visit her, and she was sleeping. So I let her sleep for about 3/4 of an hour, and I thought, well, I'll have to wake her up or I won't have any time with her. So when I woke her up from a dead sleep, I'm at the end of her bed, she opened her eyes and I said to her, she hadn't seen me much with my beard. I said, don't need to worry, Dottie. I said, it's not St. Peter. And she had a good old giggle over that one. And one other thing I witnessed, I happened to be home at Easter, the time their house got burnt down. And I was in a town somewhere and I saw the smoke go up and I said, gee, that must be nearly where Uncle Dottie's. By the time I got there, she'd got up from the shop. Uncle Arthur was there. He was there when it started. The curtains got in, through the fire, got in through the curtains and the open window from the hedge that got burnt from fire that he lit well down in the creek that he'd been lighting in the same spot for 25 years. It was just one of those freak things. Of course, they were there with their arms around each other, teary, watching the fire brigade, put water on what little bit of the house was left. And something was said about the Rolls Royce got out. Uncle Arthur said, yes, he said, I had to tear in. He said, it was a bit risky. He said, I had to grab the key out of the clock. And Auntie Dot said, well, why didn't you grab the clock? She said, that was a nice, valuable antique clock. Well, I suppose it's instinct when you do stuff you've done all the time. Oh, I said, I didn't think of grabbing the clock. She said, no, you old bugger. She said, if I had been in the house, she said, you would have taken the Rolls Royce out first. with which he answered, "I won't comment on that one." So it pays to have a sense of humour whenever. I've been asked by John and Mike to thank some people. I wouldn't like to miss out anyone, but her long-term friends, Keitha Price, who I don't know whether she's here today, but knew each other all their childhood and everything from Preston. In the last year or two, they've been very close, catching up as much as they could. Jason Forster, a young neighbour up the road, who took it on his own bat to start taking her bin out before he even asked her permission. He said, "I put your bin out the other day, Dottie." And so he did that and helped in many other ways. Tony Brooks, the neighbour, Trevor McKenna, the neighbour, and Peter and Vicky Trelaw. Also Baptist Care, and the carers Silver Chain. As well as that, Jeanette Windus, who I know has been friends all the same since high school. They spoke to each other every day. And also Suzanne's two sons, Mark and Craig. Mark's a young policeman here in town, and he started going up on a few occasions, even in the police car, visiting her, and could see that she was slipping a bit. And then Craig came over and they organised, in the last 6 to 12 months, Craig especially stayed there a lot and really looked after Dottie, which she appreciated greatly and really did a good job. I won't go on much more. Everyone knew she was a good businesswoman. They also, as well as the shops, at one stage did a bit of development. They built some townhouses down in Dial Street, which really was a shame they didn't go. They were going to build 8, but only 2 sold. They were a little bit ahead of their time, really, for Ulverston. But they're standing the test of time and looking really good. It was a shame the whole complex wasn't built. She developed where the Harris Scarf is, bought that when John Coghlan died in 1991, and that stands there today. It started off as venture. I did have a bit of a chuckle. Harris Scarf got taken over a year or two ago by Spotlight, and some Launceston agent got involved to renegotiate the lease. And there was some comment about the fact that, some little old lady owns the Ulverston shop. But I think they found out that the little old lady knew a bit about business as much as they did. She was a great supporter, as was mentioned earlier, with the Mardi Gras and all the festive things that went on with Ulverston and the Chamber of Commerce, always on the Chamber of Commerce. Any organisation or any good cause that went in, she'd soon grab some stock and say, "We'll put that towards whatever." She's a very generous person, but didn't really have or like to show it much. And my personal experience, she really, when I... I'm sorry, but this is... in the time in 2021, when all the Melbourne lockdowns were on, and we couldn't come to see Mum when she was dying and needles are hurting. Dottie would ring me 2 and 3 times a day just to check on me, just to talk. And in many ways, when Mum died, she took over in the sense that we became very close and would have 2 or 3 conversations every day. And really, the first 2 weeks that she went into the hospital, I missed that. Just the fact that I think you must give Dottie a ring. No, I can't. She couldn't speak. She was a good woman. I'm not going to pretend she was a saint. She had a few Lewis traits. She could be pig-headed. She'd like an argument better often than a debate. But she was very kind, compassionate, and the world's a lot better off for the fact that Dot Bellinger, or Nee Lewis, came into it. Thank you very much.
Well done, Philip. I think after hearing so much about Dot's business achievements, I think it's important to, think about, or to remind us that Dot's probably biggest achievement, I think, was her family. Her sons, John and Michael, and her grandchildren, Lisa, Kylie, Michaela and Hayley, and her great-grandchildren, Kiara, Jonty and Dash. Dot simply lived for her family, And my guess is that that's probably what drove her a lot in her business, was to leave her family a legacy that they could be proud of. Dot, I hope that you know today how proud your family are of you. As we heard in Jeff's tribute after Arthur's death in 2014, Dot rediscovered her love of sport, and she swapped the hockey sticks and the tennis rackets of her youth for a caddy of clubs. And she made a connection on the golf course with Fleur King. And I would like to invite Fleur to come forward now and to share with us some memories and some stories of her time with Dot with us. There must be a few stories that can be shared, perhaps.
Hello. No, it's all good. I've got my tissues. Right, okay, so good afternoon, everyone. As Jeff Lewis stated earlier, what happens on tour stays on tour, but I'm all for sharing with you today some of Dot's secrets. I first met Dot in early 2014 at the Ulverston Golf Club. I hadn't been playing golf for long, and I'd always remember our first meeting because in her golf cart, Dottie just about ran me over. As she whizzed past me on the 6th hole, which had been, for those who have played golf in Ulverston, it's a long par 5. Dot was in a rush to finish the golf round as her husband Arthur was not well at the time, and I'm quite sure she wanted us to speed through our game so she could head home to spend time with him. Sadly, I never got to meet Arthur before his passing later that same year. But Dottie spoke of him often, and from all accounts he was a much-loved husband who had a great sense of humour. Apparently Arthur was an amazing dancer too. Dottie often spoke about how they met at a country dance, where he was not her partner at the dance, but rather, when she was being driven home by her partner that night, Arthur hooned past in his car, and I don't think she ever forgot that first meeting. It was only after Arthur's passing that Dottie and I seriously became golfing mates and great friends, and I always regret not having the opportunity to meet Arthur. Okay, now our friendship started in March 2016 where she was hosting a golf cart naming day at the Ulverston Club. She was naming her golf cart Arthur. And yes, it was the same golf cart that she almost ran me over. The event was attended by Dot's grand and great-grandchildren, being Lisa, Jonty and Kiara. Kylie, Michaela and Hayley, if I missed you, I do apologise. I only have the photos to go on who attended. There was plenty of wine consumed at the time, not by me, I was the official photographer, but you get the general idea. It was from then that Dottie and I became firm friends, and together we travelled across the state, including Smithton, where she borrowed a 3-wheeler golf buggy, which saw her long legs reach her chin. In early December 2018, we travelled to Hobart to welcome in the new year, where we got to see the tail end of the Sydney to Hobart yacht race. We also managed to squeeze in a round of golf at the Tasmanian Golf Club, where Dot knew the PGA head golf professional because he was raised in Tasmania's northwest. If there was one thing about Dot, no matter where you went, she always knew somebody and they knew her. Now, Dot is what we call a handy golfer, and what I mean by that is she has a high handicap, so the boys, gentlemen, love to play with her because her handicap came in handy when attempting to win an event. There was no more truer than when she played at the 2019 Powatena Golf Club annual tournament, and both her and her partner cleaned up. She said to me at the time that the young man she played with looked worried at the first tee when he saw who had been partnered with, as Dot was in her 70s at the time. But when she started holing putts from off the green, which was a Dottie special, he was grinning from ear to ear by the time they had finished. They won every prize one could win on the day, including the gross and net. Excuse me, sir. Later that year, Dot and I headed to Samoa to catch up with her son John, and where I managed to get her into swimming pool as she wasn't a great swimmer. John also introduced us to Talua beer, which is a crisp, smooth beer brewed in Apia. I had to mention that as we talked about buying shares in the brewery at the time. It was that good. In 2020, the dreaded COVID hit Tasmania, and as a hospital worker, I was placed in close contact isolation as part of the Burnie hospital closure. This saw me isolating at home for 4 weeks. The amazing thing was that I didn't have to access the support services that were available at the time. I'm just going to breathe. As it was Dot who dropped off supplies to me, including the basics such as milk and bread, as well as the much needed hamburger, chips, and the flat white. This is what friends do, and I'll always remember how she looked after me during that period of time. Right, I will get it together. Particularly as there was significant concern and fear at COVID within the broader community. I could go on and on about many of the trips and travels, including Coff Harbour in New South Wales in March 2020 with the Ulverston Golf Ladies, the sharing of many meals with her brother Jeff and his wife Maureen, as well as celebrating her great friend Joan's 90th birthday in June 2021. I must make special mention of Dot's relationship with Tony and Sandra Densley and the time we travelled to visit them in Adelaide, South Australia in January 23. At the time, Dot had been diagnosed with bowel cancer and was recovering from associated surgery, but she was determined to travel to Adelaide to celebrate the important family occasion with the Densley family. This is because both Dot and Arthur had a long-standing friendship with the Densley family, particularly Tony, who had helped build Arthur's and Dot's home at 4 Brookvale Avenue in Ulverston. It was from that point onwards that life in general was catching up with Dot, who had been in great health for many, many years. In fact, when I took Dot to hospital one day, she did not have an electronic medical record, as she hadn't been admitted to hospital for some time. I think the last time she'd been admitted was for the birth of her son Michael at the former Bellinger Hospital, now known as Parkside. As Dot's health declined, her ability to travel more broadly diminished, and that was a great sadness for her as she became more reliant on visits from family and friends. So a special shout out to her nephew Craig, who in Dot's last few months would often pick Dot up with her childhood friend Keitha and her daughter Sharon to drive them to cafes across the northwest for coffee and cake and even dinner. Dot also appreciated phone calls. Craig, your presence was a great comfort to Dot, and that can't be overstated. Dot also appreciated phone calls from families and friends, and if you didn't call, she would always follow up or track you down. And she genuinely wanted to know what you were up to and if she could help. She always had plenty of news to share, and she'd often keep me updated on what was happening in Ulverston. Who was who through the Advocate hatched, matched and dispatched, and she would regularly share short, intriguing facts or updates that later proved true. For example, Tom, it was the girls, including Dot, who painted, was it the fence or shed, for which you and the boys were blamed for many, many years ago. She said I could tell you only when she had passed away. Sorry. Dot, having worked most of her life, wanted nothing for the best for her children, Michael and John, and she was very proud of the achievements her family made, no matter how big or small, including her grand and great-grandchildren, Lisa, Kiara, Jonty, Kylie, and young Dash, as Dot called him, and Michaela and Hayley. Right, okay. Dotty, I miss our daily phone conversations, particularly when I drive to and from Burnie Hospital to Devonport, and as this sees me pass your house on the hill in Ulverston most days. It is with a heavy heart that I can no longer talk to you about my work and the dramas, as you always give such sound advice and support. I miss our weekly coffees and cake catch-up, where you would often talk to me about your life, including how Arthur and yourself started the business in West Ulverston, which later expanded across the state with support from relative Sir Reginald Wright. You talked about when times were tough and saw Arthur travel to Savage River to sell clothes, I think that was the menswear, at the mine, and drive an empty old Ford mainline ute with a canopy to Launceston with a then very young Jeff Lewis in the early hours of every Sunday morning to collect bread, as there was no fresh bread baked on the northwest coast at the time. You also talked about when Sir Reginald Wright was visiting your business on, is it Reby Street? When the mezzanine floor was being installed. He said he had just been driving past the cemetery where your Uncle Jim was interred, and he thought that Jim could get the most out of $1. But on visiting Dot, he realised that Dot left Jim for dead. Through the years, Dot would often chuckle about this observation. Very few people understand to be successful, it requires a combination of resilience, clarity of purpose, continuous learning, and execution, and requires one to build their own path. Dot and Arthur worked hard to be successful, and their achievements were obtained through sheer grit and determination. They are a hard act to follow for the younger generation, and their success was due to their pioneering spirit. I say pioneering because Dot was never a camper, and Arthur often said she had none. But I, for one, can attest that Dot had a driving mindset characterised by a willingness to embrace the unknown, endure hardship, and take risks to explore and develop innovative ideas. And I wish I had known her when she was younger, as she would have been a formidable and awe-inspiring individual, and it's no wonder Arthur snapped her up. When Arthur passed, he did leave behind his dog Nell. Now Dot was not fond of dogs in any way, shape or form, but I have to say Dot's heart was always big, and I'm sure Nell had never eaten so well, and Dot would often visit the IGA or butcher to purchase pig's ears and other treats until Nell's passing. Dot would not admit it, but she loved that dog, and Nell was a great comfort to her following Arthur's passing. I must not forget the other men in Dot's life, as she had great support from Merv Kemp and Tommy Maxwell. Merv helped Dot a lot, and this included obtaining cuttings for her king proteas for the numerous florist bouquets Dot hand delivered to friends and family across the region. Merv also used his skills as a painter often. Dot also appreciated the regular visits from childhood friend Tommy Maxwell. I was often find them laughing and sharing stories together over a coffee about Ulverston and the people who live there. So thank you, Dottie, for being an amazing friend, and I thank you not only for sharing your life memories with me, but also for sharing your family and friends. To Tommy Maxwell and Merv Kemp, Joan, Craig, Keith and Sharon, is it Beisel, Uni Beisel and his family, Katie Cook and young Toby, Nettie A.K. Willis, as Arthur would call her, Mick and Rose Knowles, Pat and Lindsay Deegan, Tony and Sandra Densley, I will finish soon, Jeff and Maureen Lewis, Suzanne and Jimmy, John and Michael Bellinger and their children and their children's children. Dot had a profound love and respect for you all. She's left a legacy behind through her family and friends, and although her life was quicker than the wink of an eye, she only ever wanted the very best for her family, for her friends, and the broader Ulverston community, who have gained much from her philanthropic, I think that's how you pronounce it, and fundraising efforts. Dot, I'm truly grateful for your friendship. And I will always be a better person for it. Thanks.
There was just one thing that's never been mentioned along the way. Jeff wouldn't have been old enough to remember. When Dottie was 12, she had 12 months that she didn't go to school. She had a very slight case of polio and she got rheumatic fever. She went to school with a girl that had it at the same time, and that lady dropped dead at 42. Rheumatic fever evidently can have a bad effect on your heart. So it just shows you that in life you never know, because she made her 87th year. Part of that was probably determination and grit, but anyway, that was just one thing. It reminds anyone that is having some form of illness. She was that weak that Pop used to have to go into the bedroom and pick her up and carry her out to the dining table for that 12 months. So if you're on a downer and you're not too well, and whatever the medical thing is, you can always go on, get on with it, and get on with life for nearly 90 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Fleur. Thank you, Jeff, earlier, and Philip. It's never easy to come this side of the microphone, and I thank you all for doing it so eloquently. Dot's time amongst us came to an end on Sunday, the 26th of April, 2026, after a short but inspirational fight. Dot will be remembered for her love, her humour, her determination.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, yeah.
messing where you shouldn't have been a messing. And now someone else is getting all your best. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you. Yeah. You keep lying when you ought to be truthing. And you keep losing when you ought to not bet. You keep saying when you ought to be a-changing. Now what's right is right, but you ain't been right yet. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you. You keep playing where you shouldn't be playing. And you keep thinking that you'll never get burned. Ha! I just found me a brand new box of matches, yeah. And what he knows you ain't had time to learn. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you. Are you ready, Boots? Start walking.
We come now to a time where I would like to express some words of thanks. And firstly, I'd like to thank Dot herself. I'd like to thank her, for being a wonderfully supportive wife, best friend, business partner to Arthur for the 53 odd years that they spent together, for being the best mum to John, to Michael that she could be, and for welcoming their partners into her family with open arms, for being the proudest grandmother and great-grandmother to Lisa, to Kylie, Michaela, Hayley, Kiara, Jonty and Dash. Thank you, Dot, for your love of your family, your love of your community and its people, which is, I'm sure, what drove you most in your business ventures. We thank you for your warmth, for your loyalty, for your friendly, outgoing personality, for always stopping and saying hello to everyone in the street. We thank you for your friendly but firm business acumen. I'm sure the Central Coast Council have breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that you are no longer here to keep them on their toes. I thank you for your confidence, for your independence, your hard work, your steadfast love, your love of sport, of hockey, tennis, football, golf, and of course, your beloved St Kilda Football Club. For all of these things, Dot, we thank you. And finally, I have some thanks from Dot's family, and perhaps from Dot herself. Thank you, John, Michael and Julie, Lisa, Kylie, Michaela, Hayley, Kiara, Jonty, Dash, your partners, your families, for your unending and unwavering support of Dot and her family. Thank you to Jeff, to Philip and to Fleur for your earlier words in honour of Dot and the relationship with her that you all shared. To Dr. Emmett and to all the doctors and nursing and care staff at the Northwest Regional Hospital for making Dot's last time with us as comfortable as it could be. And finally, to all of you, Dot's friends and the wider community, we thank you for the support, the care, the phone calls, the Facebook posts, the flowers and prayers, the messages of sympathy expressed to Dot's family. They have been overwhelmed. Since Dot's death 6 weeks ago, I'm sure that we have all had many opportunities to reflect on and to remember all of the things that made her unique and special to you. Sometimes you would have shared those memories and stories with others, just as we have done today. Other times, you would have remembered them quietly, in the quiet times, pondering them on your own. There have been times when those memories slid down your cheek as a tear, and times when they made you smile. We know that death is about saying goodbye, and there have been many goodbyes already said to Dot. Dot's death has happened. Her private funeral service has taken place, and now our public goodbye has been said. Dot's earthly body has been cremated, and the process of ashes to ashes and dust to dust has taken its course. And before us today lie her ashes. To close our service, maybe these would be some words to us from Dot. I leave myself to your memory with love. To you I leave my thoughts, my laughter, my smile, my dreams, to you who I have treasured. I give to you now what no thief can steal, the memories of our times together, the tender moments, the successes that we shared, the hard times and the fun times, and the times that brought us closer together, and the roads that I have walked side by side with many of you. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our service here this afternoon. I remind you of the family's warm invitation to stay if you're able, and to share with them a time of refreshment. As Dot's family prepare to leave, could I invite you all to please stand?
Unforgettable, that's what you are. Though near or far, like a song of love that clings to me. How the thought of you does things to me. Never before has someone been more unforgettable in every way, and forevermore, that's how you'll stay. That's why, darling, it's incredible that someone so unforgettable thinks that I am unforgettable too. and forevermore. That's how you'll stay. That's why, darling,